Hey everybody. Hello. Welcome to Hot Boys
Hot
Talk
Boys Talk
Show.
Show.
I like how we tried to get it in time, but
We'll see if it actually comes across. We've never actually tried to do that, and we didn't agree to try to do that. So happy Friday, everyone. I'm Tamsin.
I'm Daniel, and our guest today is
SarahBelleReid.
Sarah.
Hey Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
We always ask everyone, just kind of by way of introduction, how they would describe what they do. So maybe we can start there. What would you say, like your practices and what you do as an artist?
I am a performer composer. I think that is usually what I feel good about saying. I play trumpet and I play electronic instruments and things, often electronic instruments that are made up of things I find lying around my house. It's kind of where my current interests lie. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how in depth you wanted me to go in, but that's sort of the
Yeah, that's a good
basics.
overview.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting recent around your house object that you've picked up as an instrument?
Probably a close tie between a cactus, one of those, I can't remember the name, but one of those really round ones with the really long, yes, a barrel cactus. Yeah, because those sound great. Also, I recently discovered I have a fantastic sounding cookie tray.
Like as like a thunder sheet, or
no, more like a scrapey tappy percussion instrument. Put a contact mic on it and it gets really distorted and gross sounding, but then you can like process it and work with it, and it sounds like you've spent time and money developing some kind of really cool percussion.
But you really just spent time and money on
but cookies. you just yeah. I really just sat on the floor of my kitchen with a cookie tray and banged it around like a 6-year-old for 20 minutes, and then was like, this is really cool. New instrument.
Nice.
Yes.
Cookie Sheet would be a great band name.
I like
I don't know. My vowel senses are saying yes to that. But anyway, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, like when you started making music, when you started playing trumpet, sort of how you gotten where you are now.
Sure. In some way or another, I've been making music pretty much for my whole life. I started when I was 4, so on just like playing piano with my mom as my first piano teacher, which was awesome. Although, trying to be told to practice by your parent is always fun. It's just like similar to being told to like pick up your toys and stuff. So that worked not so well, but it's okay. Yeah. And then, I started playing trumpet. I really wanted to play with people. That was something that as a young kid, I was like, I want to play in a band or something. And so the trumpet was an instrument that kind of found me. I was still really young. I think I was about 8 or so. And I was talking endlessly about how I wanted to play a band instrument.
Yeah.
Because that's so cool. So cool. And my parents were like, what? Yeah, I want to be in band. They're not about to buy me an instrument. My uncle had a marching band trumpet from way back when that had been collecting dust in his garage, and they gave it to me. And that was that. I liked it enough to play it still for now, until now.
Yeah. To have a quarter tone flugelhorn.
Exactly. Now I have all of the like Dr. Seuss trumpets, and those are a more recent discovery, and they are fantastic.
Yeah.
Very fun. I didn't start working with electronics and electronic music until a lot later on. I was in grad school in California at CalArts. And because I hadn't even heard that world. I was doing very classical orchestral training, and I wasn't even aware that electronic. I kind of knew they must exist because you hear pop music and you're like, that's clearly not a cello. There's something going on there. But I had never given it much more thought than that until I was in grad school. And that was also around the same time that I started composing. So I was, very much thought I was going to be a trumpet player forever and play in orchestras. And then the floodgates kind of opened for me in many ways when I started grad school. And I'm pretty grateful for that, because it was the start of a lot of the rest of my life. So
yeah. I mean, Daniel and I were just talking about how like definitely intimidated we are by, you know, the whole modular synth world, because of just, it seems like the amount of technical knowledge and gear and just time of like watching tutorials, reading about stuff and trying to put things together. Like being in grad school, like especially, you know, it's you're juggling so many things of being a professional, being a student, you know, probably teaching other people too. Like, how did you find like the time and the energy to be like, okay, I'm going to like invest and learn about electronic music?
My whole reason for going to grad school was because I had kind of gotten to a bit of a crossroads with my musical life up until that point. I was I had taken some time. I took a year or maybe 2 years off after my undergrad degree, and I was dealing with a lot of pretty huge things for being an instrumentalist. Like I went through this big embouchure change, which for anyone who's a brass player or a wind player, you know that's crazy and challenging and can take years to overcome. And I was also dealing with a lot of really intense stage fright and performance anxiety, to the point where I was kind of like wondering why I had lost the thing that was the reason why I wanted to do music, even though I knew at one point I had loved it, obviously. So I decided, I had this opportunity to come out to California and to go to this program that people were kind of hinting and suggesting was going to like flip my perception of the world upside down. And I was like, sure, why not? Yeah, exactly. And so I kind of came with that goal in mind. I sometimes tell people that I was in, like, from day one at that point in my life, I was like, I am in sponge mode and I'm just ready, like, to absorb. That was me as a sponge walking down the hallway, ready to absorb anything and everything. And so, you know, one of the very first things I did, instead of going into the orchestra, which I think I was required, or it was strongly suggested that I played in the orchestra because I was there as a trumpet player. There was a site-specific performance art class that took place at the same time, and it was in the theater school. And I basically begged that I could do that instead, you know. So I was just like, I was not focused on the same things. So to me, the opportunity to learn electronic music and all about that was like, that's
why you're there.
I was like, sign me up. I don't know anything. I've never opened, I mean, I had done email. I had like used a computer for schoolwork, but anything beyond that, forget about it. It was so new. And that was really exciting. That was kind of my whole motivation at the time.
Well, yeah, that's incredible. How long ago did you do that? I just want to get a sense of your crazy timeline.
2013 to 15.
Oh my God. I mean, it's been some time since then, but still, now you're like, you know, teaching a course on modular synths. So it's,
well, I mean, one of the biggest things, it sounds so corny to say this, but when you dive into something, you can really learn a lot very quickly. When you're like laser focused and just immersed. That was what happened for me.
Yeah, maybe we can take a look at the piece and see some of it like happening live. Because this piece, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because this piece has many different layers to it that are really integrated.
This piece meaning the sameness of earlier and later times and nows.
Yes.
That piece.
that piece. But maybe the sameness for shortness. But yeah, this piece, the sameness, has many different layers to it that seem super integrated, and a lot of electronics are happening. So maybe we can take a look and talk through some of it. I don't know if you want to say something before we show a clip. We're looking at this spot around 26, is that right? Or
yeah, 26:30.
so
It's with all the
Light
the
bulbs?
lights. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I was gonna say it's very sick. There's many timestamps that Daniel and I were trying to decide which to play. But
Thanks.
But yeah, actually, a few words about where this project came from, and there's obviously a lot of people involved in the production of the video.
There's a lot of people involved in the show. Yeah. So that was a performance, a piece. It was a piece that was developed for performance, which I think maybe is important. I'm just trying to pull it up so I can remember the year, because I can't.
2019, February 6th, 2019. Okay. Yeah.
That was a little more recent. So I am really fascinated by thinking about time and memories and the passing of time and ideas about, future memories and past anticipations, and like all of this kind of just basically thinking about the progression of, or our experience of time as being this big twisted network of moments that are all overlapping and happening simultaneously and are all connected and very much like interwoven with one another. And that started back in 2014 or 15, that kind of fascination. And I did a series of pieces. The first one I think was called Disonulum, which is sort of about time in a slightly different way. And then there's a piece called Timepiece. And then this one, I know, on the nose with that one. And then this one, and then there was a Timepiece too. And they all kind of are based on what I just said, basically exploring this like circular feedback-based idea of experiencing time. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go in compositionally, but every aspect of this piece was considered in that way. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the video, we captured video well in advance of the show leading up to the day of the actual concert, and it was being kind of processed and manipulated and fed back into itself. And then sonically, in terms of the sound, there were a lot of things where there was materials produced before that were brought back and like manipulated in time by chopping them up into little pieces and rearranging them and taking the source of a sound and pairing it with an unrelated visual. Like, for example, the sound of the light bulbs that we'll see in a second, using that as sound source in another section of the piece and all of this. So it was kind of just this big, like, if I could lay out these moments in time and then just kind of whoosh, mix them all around, what would come out? Yeah.
Let's do a little bit of listening.
Yeah, tough one to stop, I think.
Tough one to stop. I mean, we usually say that. It's like, oh, we want to capture some of, there's so many elements at play in, I mean, in your music usually, but like, there's just a lot of stuff we want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really watching it, I really want to be there live. Like, it'd be so cool to just feel the lights and what they do to the space.
Yeah.
And also just in this piece particularly, I think you draw attention so much to these little minute movements you're doing with the trumpet or with the plunger, or later on with the synths. It's a little more like, I think it's just very like tactile and right there with you. And I guess we could go a bunch of different places, but I guess on a technical level, I was wondering if you could talk about the Migsy trumpet setup.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how you say it, but there's
Migsy,
something connected, right, to the trumpet, or
yes.
Yeah.
So Migsy stands for minimally invasive gesture sensing interface.
Minimally invasive.
And that's because that's a ridiculous title, but that's because I went to grad school.
Yeah.
And that's what you do, is you come up with acronyms that are very fancy. But I love that it's just kind of a cute name for this thing that goes on my trumpet. So I never refer to it in that way. Migsy is basically a sensor-based interface, or a piece of hardware that goes onto my trumpet. It has sensors embedded in it, and it captures different kinds of real-time performance data from me, like moving my valves, squeezing my left hand, or the tension of my left hand, and then the tilt. You could see in that last clip, I picked my trumpet up and I was just like waving it around.
Yeah.
There's some actual kind of position data coming from it as well. And I use that in the same way that someone would use like a MIDI controller or another kind of controller to interact, or a keyboard, But because I'm a trumpet player, it's important for me to be able to do that at the same time as playing my horn, so that I'm not like split and trying to be like a one-person band kind of like kicking and so that's basically what was going on. It sends data in the form of serial data over to my computer, and then you can convert that into MIDI, or in this case, I'm converting it into control voltage for the modular synth that was behind me, and also into OSC, which is another form of, it stands for open sound control, and that's being basically sent out to like the light bulbs and a couple other places. So it was like my central hub that allowed me to create this performance space where everything was connected in some way, which was a really big goal for the piece. And that's why I said at the beginning, it might not have made sense at first when I said it was a piece that was composed for a performance, but like the space aspect of it was really important from the very beginning, and having all of these elements, not just layers that were happening at the same time, but having them really be kind of connected in that like interwoven way, So.
And it seems to connect to the idea of the overlapping, or just like chaotic time, that it's like, as time is also being, you're jumping around in and out of like maybe past, present, or future. There's also a way that we get confused about what exactly is like running stuff. Like, do the lights run everything? Is the trumpet running everything? You know what I mean? It's all getting confused in nice ways.
That's it. If you think about like a non-linear feedback loop, so something feeding back into itself, but then non-linearities are introduced either by the environment or by like the system itself, because maybe there's multiple loops. You lose control. Not only do you lose that sense of like what's driving it, but also you kind of decouple the input from its typical result. So I might do something that in a normal system would make the pitch go up, for example, like move a slider, pitch goes up. But in one of these feedback systems, you move a slider and it might result in the pitch getting unstable and like 5 other things happening down the line in various other nodes in this feedback web. And that's something that is just so interesting to me, because it's like a model for everything.
An ecosystem, you know.
Exactly.
I was actually, you know, a good friend of mine in college worked a lot with a surge and improvising on the surge. And I was sort of, you know, from talking to them, it seemed like a lot of, like, you have to do a lot of practicing and have a lot of knowledge to be able to, you know, sort of like act to actually make changes into the sound that you can somewhat predict. You know, it's just such a complex system. And I was sort of, you know, wondering what your relationship is like, especially if you're, you know, you work a lot to make, for the ability to streamline your control of different aspects of your setup. But where does unpredictability and sort of, you know, the organic proliferation of all of these, you know, things that happen in these kinds of systems come into your work?
Well, I mean, I'm really interested in chaos and this idea. I was like, sorry, it sounded ridiculous. I love chaos, but I really do. And I think it comes into this idea of feedback again, right? Because that's one of the ways that you can create chaos and chaotic systems on a synth, is by patching an output back into its own input. And doing that in different creative ways can start to create incredibly interesting little ecosystems in this way. So for me, when I'm thinking about, you know, there's always a bit of a balance between wanting to have some control, so that it is an instrument that I am playing and able to direct and nudge, at least to an extent. But I found out really early on that the one-to-one, I am totally in the driver's seat, I am the master of this tool, was not super inspiring to me. So I always embed some aspect of that chaos or some kind of nonlinear control, where maybe I do something and instead of it just having one result, it has 5. You know, or it sets 10 things into motion, and then I get to respond to those, which musically as an improviser is something that's really gratifying, because then I'm like, ooh, cool. Now I'm both a performer and I am an observer of this process that's happening, and I get to learn from it and listen and interact. And so I definitely use a lot of randomness in certain ways, not all the time, and then chaos and feedback. And
so you started off as a trumpet player, but in this, I'm sure you sort of had the, like, you know, conversations with yourself, like, what does the tube afford you?
What does the tube afford? Can you elaborate on that?
I know. Yeah, sorry. Because, you know, like, there's so many times I think that you have, you know, it's not like you have the controls on your trumpet, and that could be mounted to anything, but what specifically from a sonic perspective do you find is like necessary and part of you that can come from the tube?
Okay, I get it.
I just wanted to ask it like that. I'm sorry, Daniel.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I mean, tubes. That's actually funny, because I often tell people that I just kind of spit into metal tubes for I guess that's my thing. But I mean, tubes sound fantastic. I don't know if you've spent much time
with tubes.
But tubes of all shapes and sizes, blowing into them, singing into them, they're actually incredible resonators. But okay, I mean, specifically the trumpet, for me, it's one of those instruments that just like maybe it's because I started so young, but it just feels like an extra arm. And I know it so well that the idea of, I mean, I love it. For one, I love it. Two, I had played it for my whole life, and the idea of completely starting fresh didn't sound appealing to me. The idea of like adding and augmenting and growing my extant relationship with this instrument, that sounded really exciting. There's also an uncanny similarity, in my opinion, between some electronic sounds and some sounds you can get on the trumpet. Things like filtered noise sounds a lot like blowing air through the tubes and then pressing down valves, and kind of it creates this like strange formanty filtery sound. You can sing and play so multiphonics at the same time on a trumpet, and it sounds a lot like a ring modulator on an electronic instrument. And so I discovered all these similarities, and then the vocabulary to me just was like a dream come true, because I was like, wow, there's all these kind of links, and I can synthesize new sounds, but then I can react to them acoustically, and it just really feels connected. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also sort of connected back to that sort of confusion of like, where's the source, and where is the sound coming from? Is this sort of smoke and mirrors kind of effect that is just sort of radical and fun.
There's so much about the trumpet too that I think is just, I don't want to say underexplored, because that's not true. There's a lot of amazing trumpet players out there who are exploring all corners of the instrument. But I guess when the instrument really, really opened up for me was when I started to say, okay, here's the like performance practice on the trumpet that we know and love and have been working on for many decades. And here's everything else, like all the bad sounds and the like when you've got too much water in the tubes and it starts to gurgle, and like, all those beautiful extra stuff, they're a big part of my main vocabulary. And really embracing all of that stuff and getting over the like, oh, that's an ugly sound, but like, wow, what a fascinating, unstable, unpredictable sound. And wow, my face does not want to like vibrate in that way. And as a result, it's creating this like crazy interaction, and like thinking about it more from a curious place than a like shame on you, that really was liberating for me.
Yeah, which I mean, it's hard to let go of from a like stringent classical training, literally. Like, I think for a long time, I started as a flute player, and for a long time I had a hard time listening to a lot of jazz flute players, because there's just a completely different like approach to articulation. And I'd be like, it would like physically like be like frustrated, because like I knew that if I was trying to make the articulation that I wanted, it would like, I would be frustrated if that sound came out of me. It's like, it's which is just, has nothing to do with sound and everything to do with like physical training culture, and
which kind of reminded me of a thing you said earlier about I do think there's so much pressure in the classical context for how we perform. And like I remember growing up and playing percussion, and one of the first things that my teacher like did to like humble me was like bring a like a triangle, and asked me to play like 3 notes that were the same back to back on a triangle, which is just takes a lot of effort and exact fine motor skills to do, right? But I wondered if that also like creates some of our like anxiety for playing that you maybe were discussing before, of like there's so much pressure that actually asks you not to explore or be curious about certain things and only focus and explore this particular set that I guess ostensibly is orchestral or traditional or something. Professional, right? So it's nice to go into those places and try to enjoy them, you know, and like, yeah, not feel like you're you're messing up or something. And there's actually a ton of beauty in them. I think the beginning of this sameness kind of has some of those like spurts on the trumpet that sound really really cool, and they like bring out the material that is in the trumpet, like just this very low, like quick fundamental tubing sound, you know.
Right.
So
and I loved the quarter tone, like, because it's the quarter tone more in the beginning, like the expressiveness of using quarter tones. And it's like, yeah, sing it.
Yeah.
Sing it, queen.
I love it too. Yeah. It's so slippery and everything. Well, it's just, I mean, it's the same idea about all of the in-between sounds, you know. I think there's a lot of value in working to develop all of these techniques. Because it gives you the facility to move around the instrument and to hear something and be like, I'm doing that, you know? So it's not it's for me, I'm really grateful I went through all of that training. And in addition, I'm really grateful that I met some people who encouraged me to like explore and sit with the ugly sounds and really figure out why I was feeling the way I was feeling about them, and like to consider them as potential musical sounds, because the combination of all of that is awesome in my opinion. So
yeah, cool. I know we've been talking about this one for a bit, but I really did I'm interested in some of the staging questions in the piece, and maybe just poetics of like the physicality of this piece, and also some of the ways that the synths are placed, or like the setup, because I'm interested in like okay, I feel like a lot of times I see the synth in the piece, and it's like on the side, like I don't know, maybe it's like me reading into it, but it's like ominously there, like it's waiting to be played, or like it's in the background doing work, you know. And then at a certain point you do end up going to it and
very dramatically inching up.
I guess what I'm pointing to,
I was like, this is so dramatic.
I guess what I'm asking is like, it seems really important, the staging and even the minute physical gestures from a musical standpoint, obviously because this data is being gathered from your physicality, but also from like a dramatic standpoint. And I wondered if you could talk about how the drama or theater of it kind of comes together.
Sure. Yeah, I always think a lot about all of these things.
Yeah, that's cool.
Good. That's
I always
why
think
it's good.
a lot about all of these details so much. So there was this story behind this piece that was not about so much directly about time. I don't have it here. I thought maybe it was close by, but the program, when people arrive, okay. Step one, the concert was already happening when people came in. And that was really important to me, that people felt like they were walking into something that was already happening. So there was no like start, right? Because time, wibbly wobbly ball of time. They were given like a little booklet that unfolded, that revealed as they unfolded it that there was like a little astronaut inside of the stomach of a whale, and the whale was in space. So I had made up this whole story about a whale, a giant whale floating through space for some reason. That part we don't need necessarily know. And there was another traveler who I think was me, who got swallowed by this whale who's traveling through space. And I was kind of trying to communicate with the outside world. I had all these little gadgets and tools, and I had been like accumulating space debris and stuff. And we were getting, bear with me, folks, I don't know. And we were getting sucked in and out of different, folds in the space-time continuum and in and out of wormholes and all this kind of stuff, which is what happens at the very end, incidentally, just because the drama is there, because we were about to fall into something. Okay, so that was the kind of image in my head in the terms of the narrative. And so everything was about kind of trying to create that, not literally like the inside of a whale, but I had this idea that the light bulbs hanging from the ceiling were these little mischievous caretakers that had also they were like hitchhikers. Maybe they were stars that had gotten swallowed by the whale that kind of had little lives of their own, and they would kind of maintain the environment, but they'd also cause trouble. And there were little miniature chairs.
Yeah. Yes.
And there were like living room lamps and rugs and lots of monitors, and some of them were broken and some of them were functional, and they were all displaying seemingly random stuff, but all of the information was coming from the synths. So it was just this little weird whale stomach living room that I invited people into. Does that answer your question? We brought these big baffles in so that we could project on the entire space, just to help create the entire environment, as opposed to having like a projection screen over here and then, the split attention thing. I really wanted it to feel like there was one sort of zone. That was a long answer. I hope that
it was good. It was good to hear about the whale, because
there were whales.
We didn't get any of that. Just have the information on the YouTube video.
I think on your website it shares the synopsis if people want to read more of it. But I think it's interesting to know it, because I did read that and then watch it, and I like how we do feel like sort of, I don't want to say stuck, because a lot of stuff's happening and it really keeps you churning, but there are times when you do feel like we're in this thing, and there's a strong sense of staging and dramatic stuckness while things are still churning. And I think you do that in the timing of even just how long we're sitting in sounds and how long the kind of granular processes take, so that I think it really does capture that sense of like, how long have I been here, and that slippery time that's sort of part of the piece.
And from like a theatrical perspective, I think having those moments, so there's some moments where lights sort of are almost totally snuffed out, and I feel like, unfortunately I wasn't there, but like that as a watcher would make me sort of re-recognize the space and the kind of living room belliness of it. It was a very, very cool choice. Let's move on to talking about your album that came out in March. Sure. We have a little section from the first track, Passage, queued up. But do you want to sort of talk a little bit about the project and sort of the circumstances around it, what you were trying to go for and things like that?
Sure. Yeah, I was driving across the country. Well, I didn't record this while I was driving across the country. I feel like that's an important thing to say. But I had just recently driven across the country January of this year. And that in itself was a totally crazy experience. But and then I had arrived in this place, and immediately there was a massive snowstorm, which was something I hadn't experienced in a long time, having lived in Southern California. And everything was shut down. I was in a small enough place that it's not like city infrastructure was ready for this. They were not snow plowing, and we were hunkering down and inside for a very long time. I had this instrument this one small electronic instrument, and I had my quarter tone flugelhorn because that goes everywhere with me. And I had an idea to start kind of making a piece, and it started with one piece. And at the time I was really interested in the idea of creating a composition in the style of kind of classic tape music composition. So recording a lot of sound samples as sound samples and sources, and then cutting them up and remixing them, layering them, processing them, and constructing a composition from that.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun doing it with the first piece. The first piece that I made was Mass, actually, which is the third track. And then I just was like, okay, I want to keep going, and I want to see if I can turn this into a longer story. I just felt like it needed to expand a little bit. And it was a bit of an unusual project for me because the whole thing happened in a month, which is really rare.
Wow.
I mean, for me, I usually work a little bit slower than that. My last album I worked on for well over a year before I, was ready to release it. And similarly, these pieces, like the last one that we talked about, I was working on for many, many months. So this was a really intense, condensed period where it was like daily, all day, recording sounds and then working with them. And another thing I'll mention is that there's a lot of random household objects. So I kind of rediscovered my inner child with this album, even though the music does not sound that way. It's very intense and dark, but I was playing like cacti and cookie trays and squeaky things and cabinet doors and just running around and finding music in all of these random objects.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, I couldn't tell you where a found object sound is, in the music, because I was looking, but it's all sort of, folded in.
It is.
But let's listen to a minute of the first track. I was very surprised when I heard that section, actually, because to me it sounded so choral, and I just hadn't heard anything like that in any of your music. I was like, this sort of like harmonic stepping down, it's like very beautiful and very emotional. What does it mean to you?
That I had this for some reason, I had this memory. I don't think I've had this memory. Okay.
Is it a fake dream memory?
It might be.
I love those.
Does that ever happen to you? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have this very clear image in my mind that I feels like a memory. That's the best way I can describe it. Of being somewhere, kind of walking through these tiny, windy streets, windy roads. It kind of maybe is somewhere in Europe. I don't know. And there's like a big cathedral or a church, and you walk by and the doors are open, and it's like, you know how when the light comes through, it's all filtered. It comes through stained glass windows. It's kind of filtered, and there's dust and you sort of peer in, and somewhere down a hall and maybe like up a flight of stairs and in a room behind a closed door, there is this music happening, this like choral piece. And that was sort of this idea. I just couldn't shake this image from my mind, and the smell of it and the thickness of the air and all of it is still, it's like, so something that I can really feel. I'm like, I've been there, but I'm not sure I've been there. Maybe I haven't been there yet. And that was it. So I recorded the choral, some little detail that I don't know if anyone will find this interesting, but the choral piece, I just multi-tracked alone, but an important detail of it for me compositionally was that I was not overdubbing. I really wanted to sing one layer, and it wasn't pre-planned either. So I wanted to kind of sing a layer and then sing another layer, remembering and imagining the first, but without hearing it. Wow. And then sing another layer, remembering and imagining those. And as a result, it's all kind of slippery,
slidey,
a little bit uncomfortable, and because it's not like, it doesn't sound like I was referencing myself, because I wasn't. But I think it captured that feeling that I was experiencing at the time, of this strange memory of like a weird dusty place. I don't know. Beautiful, but dusty.
Yeah.
How does it? Oh, it's like another flip to the word mass, like that it's sort of like a church or recalls.
And that wasn't the original. Yeah, it wasn't the original idea. Behind the word mass.
Right.
But there was something just I couldn't ignore, like that image came so strong, came so with such strength to me. And it was one of those images that's like represented immediately in sound as well. You're kind of just, you can see the whole scene, and you're like, all right, I've just got to see this one through and see if I can kind of build it. So, yeah.
How does it relate to the sort of first half of the piece? Because it feels like there's the sort of two sides to this particular one.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that idea, I think it's a little bit of a little bit of just a sort of internal dialogue or internal external journey. Like for me, the end, or that section that we listened to, it's funny that you chose that section, because that was the one where it all started. It started from that part, and then it kind of just expanded out in time in both directions, the composition. And things, and you're moving around a space and you're having little thoughts, and you're passing by different objects, and maybe you've seen it before a million times, but all of a sudden the light is shining off of that sign or that bicycle in just a new way, and you reconsider it. I know that the beginning feels a little bit more like kind of turmoil and crazy, but to me it's that process of just like experiencing thoughts and objects and spaces and moving through them, and then stopping, like walking by these open doors, and kind of something is like very compelling over there.
You gotta be, God, that reminds me of your description of sort of, at the back, down a hallway, behind a door, behind another door, and around a corner. kind of feeling reminds me a lot of this Garth Nix series. I don't know if you ever read any like young adult fantasy, but there's one book where a lot of the story takes place in this highly complicated library. It's all about sort of trying to find an object at the center of this library, this like
love it.
labyrinthine sort of thing.
Love that.
We do want to play a little bit of the second track, Collide, because we both were like, yes. Let's cue it up. Okay. Didn't quite make that cut off. Yeah, you give someone like on a dance floor on E like an aneurysm if you play that.
On the right dance floor though, it's totally like welcome. Yeah. I thought that spot is so cool because I think I really like Passage because it is very experiential, but this one felt like there are these moments of recurrence or like just like regularity that kind of break up maybe the sense of like a larger just electronic kind of mass of stuff. But I just wonder about like if I think we get a particular association with that of some type of like bodily movement or dance. And I wonder in general, like with the music, if those kind of electronic reference or like acousmatic concerns are part of it, like where are we thinking of like, but like, does it arise from thinking of how electronic sound does reference the outer world, or should it be more like a blank slate? We just kind of like sit with our headphones and feel and think through it, or does it need to be either? I was just thinking through that.
It's interesting. It's an interesting thought. I think it's probably to some extent inevitable to not make associations with different sounds. People have listened to this album and said that it's, the most terrifying thing that they've ever heard. And other people have listened to it and said that they find it really like emotional and sentimental. And so I think that there's kind of, and I personally find it based on like where I kind of how I was feeling at the time of working on it, I find it to be more on the emotional, vulnerable side of things, and not like, I know that it's intense for sure, but that was not really my goal. So I wasn't setting out to say like, I'm going to make this big fat like kick drum bass sound, but it happened. And I was like, whoa, that's a big like, and I intentionally did kind of explore it in that way. I don't know, but it's an interesting question.
maybe related to, I really like hearing about your process on an electronic level, like whether you're overdubbing or not. And I wondered if, like, even just what you just said, if like you had a sound that sort of starts to suggest things, does it, maybe we could talk about that, just like do maybe improv moments create like the form of pieces, or does like one sound that seems like really powerful kind of starts to suggest things? Or maybe it's not. Do you have a
Yes.
process with that, or is it kind of just like whatever comes through?
I think it depends on the piece for sure. For this particular one, like I mentioned before, the compositional process was really about this idea of kind of a nod toward tape music. So I was really collecting sounds as sounds without a larger agenda, and without the exception to that, though, is that chorale moment that we were talking about in the last track. Like that was something where I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do it now. But everything else, I was just playing truly like a kid. And I was really trying to, that was important to me because I was kind of going through a bit of a period where composing in a more, perhaps, I don't know, formal or intentional way was feeling sticky and hard, like just difficult. And I was like, I don't know, I'm inspired to play my instruments and I want to make music, but the idea of kind of pre-planning everything is feeling hard for me right now. So I just gave myself the permission to play and record and say, I'm going to let the sounds inspire how the piece unfolds. And so then, I would go and I worked with someone else. There was a co-producer on this album whose name is Ryan Gaston, who I work with a lot. But it's really important to mention because we were listening back to the sounds together. And then one of us would be like, ooh, that sound. And I'm talking about like, here's a 20-minute recording. Here's one little like moment that is sparking and setting off everything else. And then you pull it out and you start to juxtapose it or line it up with other sounds that maybe happened 45 minutes later. And then it's the seed of something new. And then maybe it's like, okay, now that we have this idea, I'm going to go back and record more sounds in this direction or in an opposite direction to have contrast. And that was kind of the process. And then we'd bring those sounds in, work with them, rinse and repeat. And eventually the tracks emerged.
I mean, that's incredible that you did that in a month, because that can be such like a, like really allowing for things to like sort of pour out and then not be precious and pick from that. And then sort of, it's almost like sluicing, for gems and things like that. It's like, it takes a lot of patience and a lack of fear, I think. That's incredible.
Yeah. I think we were really going for the moments that, I think you saying not be precious is really cool. We were going for the moments that really just like slap you on the side of the head. Those moments
that slap.
That slap. But that's it. It wasn't like, do you think we could turn this into something? Is this a cool moment? It was like, there's no doubt. Like
there's
that
no
sound
doubt that's
is
the
just
thing.
Like, and take that and run with that. And there's more. Maybe one day we can go back through all of those other recordings and see if there's something else that wants to emerge from it. But we were kind of operating under the sense that like, exactly.
Yeah, I really relate to that sense of like, what was that? I guess it would have been almost a year into the pandemic. It really felt like I can't compose in the way I was before, or like it's really difficult for me to like sit down and notate a thing. I guess I had been moving away from that in general, but I just relate to that sense of like, I don't know if it was pandemic related, but I felt like in January and February, I needed to not have the constraint of like, let me think formally about what's next and all of that. It really frees you.
It does. It did for me, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it also facilitated and encouraged me to try things that I potentially would not have done if I had been pre-planning.
Yeah.
Because when you pre-plan, you kind of know what you think you know what you're capable of, and you plan within that structure.
Yeah.
But with this, it was like, it doesn't matter. I'm throwing paint on the wall and seeing what kind of patterns emerge and seeing what sticks. And I was grabbing, garbage cans and iron walks and books and keychains, and I was just playing, and it was really fun because there was no pressure. And then I listened back and was like, whoa, some of these sounds are actually really interesting and worth exploring more. So yeah.
Well, we should probably take our little break, and we'll be back in a bit to talk about Janet Cardiff and her sound installations and pieces and cool stuff. So stay tuned. I just saw someone came on, and sorry, we're gonna take a break now, so just hold tight.
See you soon.
See you soon.
to talk about Janet Cardiff. I guess maybe just to start, like, should we do like a overview of Janet Cardiff? Or
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
Sarah, what were some of the... You don't have to give a specific overview of her work, but just like what's interesting about Janet Cardiff that made you want to talk about it today with us here?
I think there's a couple. I mean, the reason why I originally got really inspired and interested in her work was because she does these things that she calls walks, that are like,
You like go around the corner, like it's like not a very serious journey. Sorry.
like sound walk type thing. I don't think she calls them sound walks, audio walks. I guess
Audio
they're audio
walks.
walks.
Okay.
But basically she'll kind of compose, like, it's interesting. She'll go to a space and then sort of structure a walk or go on a walk and like have photographs that or audio that kind of accompanies it, that people can then retrace that walk and experience it for themselves at a different time. And again, I'm so interested in time, anything to do with time. And this is the walk idea fascinates me because of this. When you think about being physically co-present, but temporally displaced from other people. So if you're walking the same path that you've walked a million times, but you know, different day, different shoes, different footsteps, different rhythm. Other people have walked there. Like, what were they going through? What were they feeling? Like, what did they have for breakfast? That kind of stuff is so cool, especially when you think about collapsing it in time and just like layering everyone on top of each other. So that might not at all be something that's even on her mind, but I appreciate I appreciate kind of going through her archives. Just thinking about it in that way. I think it's a really, especially with the last year, the pandemic being so isolated and so stuck in one place, something that's been really compelling to me is the idea of just making a walk be a thing that we can kind of experience and cherish and share,
really,
you know?
It has changed significance. I mean, because so many people were, myself included, like, that was kind of the only thing you felt was safe in March and April and May.
I mean, like, even, you know, I definitely stopped going outside. Like, you know, I even just going on a walk was like, I didn't want to have to think about, you know, the safety or anything.
And then she also does these amazing installations, and they share similar themes of like, there's just some whimsy that I think is so compelling, like old stuff, old antiques and mirrors and broken speakers, and it's all just so cool.
You know, these objects that are you know, you can be in, you know, in the presence of, but have this sort of temporally displaced history. We're going to look a little bit at this sort of a video of this installation piece called The Dark Pool. And so she works a lot with this other artist, I guess. He's I think maybe more of like the physical object artist, George Burris Miller. So this is one of their collaborations. Oh no, I didn't frame it right.
This slice of time where they lived for 10 years in the same space but alone, trying to create a community of things. 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, 131.
I left you a note.
I didn't see it.
You're supposed to be there in 10 Perhaps the whole thing is about my grandmother. As I'm making this, her image keeps coming up again and again. Stuck in a welded pipe wheelchair made by my uncle, with big clumsy wheels and a suspended vinyl seat. She read a lot, with a book sitting open on a card table in front of her.
Diane phoned me and told me to come, told me what she was going to do. I traveled for 3 days in the train to get to the pool. Scientists started on the second day, and billboards appeared, announcing the benefits of the water and the good hotels around it.
I was gonna stop it after the very, very creepy little scene in the trunk.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's so cool.
makes my skin crawl. I love it. But then the just like the paper cup, the guy going, "Hello, hello."
It's so great. That's the whimsy, you know. It's like
Yeah.
playful and like funny and dark and scary, and it's just so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think. Not to
Yeah.
put my opinion too loudly out there, but
I like that particular piece had me thinking about like all the traces of history on the different objects, but then also how like the sounds provide a history for the objects. Like
Mhm.
the beginning part where he says like living alone and trying to create a community of things. And so suddenly I'm thinking like how is sound and how is sound like objectified in the thing, and then how do they start connecting to the objects? And that paper cup is a great example of how like the sound becomes whimsical because it's a paper cup, and because we all or that's a very common thing that happens in childhood. So like the way the sound is emanated in the room and installed in the room starts to suggest like histories
Or
they
the
become-
existence of another person.
yeah
You know, that because you're surrounded by all these old objects, it's like this person is trying to communicate to me now, but it's, you know, who knows at what point in time.
Yeah, right.
You know, just creepy and wonderful, and also just like, you know, both times like just seeing that paper cup and thinking like it's crazy that works. Like
Yeah,
the whole like string cups, like why would that work?
And as kids, it's definitely so magical.
Physics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. It is magical.
Yeah.
There's something special about how that never goes away. Like even if you learn how it works and you know exactly what's going on, there's just something still magic about it.
Yeah.
I think. And in this piece, the way it's displayed, I think brings that back.
Yeah.
I think there's like unexpectedness in the way that in this work everything's installed. Like I thought of the gramophones that are like placed in conversation with each other and you're supposed to sit in the middle of them. Or I think there's another little set.
Yeah.
And if there's no sound, you might not. Well, I guess just when there's sound, it really suggests conversation or like mouths, and is a stand-in for people maybe. But and the fact the sound is like, you know, I mean ostensibly it's like Janet Cardiff speaking through one of them, and then the George the other artist
Miller.
speaking through the other. So you start to get a sense that these gramophones are like conversing with each other, and I don't know, all of the staging and
they're also like not really hearing each other.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the funny thing about that conversation is that they're like clearly not either listening to each other or can't hear each other.
Yeah, and mad at each other at one point. One was like mad at each other.
you know, it would be one thing if, you know, if you walked into this room and everything, you know, from the information from a sound perspective was like sinister, you know, like this could, like, it could very easily be like sort of a campy horror set, you know, but it's not. And I want to go see this one of these.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I realized that I don't have the settings done correctly. So anyone who's listening who happened to have headphones on wouldn't have gotten the, you know, binaural. How do you say that? It's like the binaural. Okay. I wasn't never sure, but wouldn't have gotten that effect because it really, the way that they recorded it, like you hear things very specifically placed, and it's one of those creepy things where I know when I first listened to it, I was like, are my headphones plugged in? Did like, yeah, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we had talked about our first interaction with, or well, my first interaction with Janet Cardiff was the 40-part motet, which is maybe a little more connected to like the classical world or the, you know, type of like university training where she's working with a motet by
Thomas Tallis.
Thomas Tallis.
Yeah.
And puts 40 different
part.
speakers in a big circle so that you can go into the space and hear every individual part surrounding you.
And like venture closer to individuals who are a speaker ostensibly. Yeah.
Do we know much about her connection to like classical music, or is there one? Because I feel like I've heard her name sort of in our circles, but I don't know if she's maybe trained in classical music or what brings her to Thomas Tallis, or like things in general, sound in general.
I don't know. There wasn't a lot of you know, information on the website. I'm a journalist. I should do more research.
Well, in any case, the 40-part motet seemed like a very, like a reimagining of, again, staging, like how to stage a piece of music and what the consequences are. And things that seem very like modernist. Like I think a lot of European modernists were thinking about like, what if we put the clarinets in the back, or like, you know, like what happens when you're surrounded by the thing? And these possibilities are really, they really alter what you're going to experience, and they have a poetic in them that's like worth thinking about. So I think she draws that out, at least in the 40-part motet, for sure.
And there's something about in the 40-part motet where they're recorded, I don't remember if it's before or after both, while they're just like standing there. So it's not just the performance of the music, but also because the speakers are placed at sort of like a general head height. Like these speakers become stand-in for the person in a more sort of transportative way for someone who's coming in, you know, and getting sort of up close and personal to this person being like getting ready to sing. I'm pretty sure there's that aspect. Yeah.
There's a middle section with just sort of like ambient noise of the people who are going to sing, like getting ready. So you're very, and the fact that these speakers are head height, it's like very, or like as tall as a person. I want to be there.
Yeah, I want to go to there. To quote Liz Lemon. Yeah, soon enough. I listened to a few different of the sort of video records of the installation pieces, the other day, and they've done a lot of work in Japan. And I kept wanting to be like, I should ask a question about that. And I was like, but we're not interviewing them.
Like, that would be cool.
Like, that'd be awesome. We should try to get them on here.
There's a comment about how in the 40-part motet piece about how there's interest in how sound may physically construct a space in a sculptural way, and how a viewer may choose a path through the physical yet virtual space, which I think is kind of an interesting thought. Because we were talking about staging earlier and all of those ideas, but thinking about just sound as a means of sculpting and structuring a feeling of like physical space and boundaries and all of that is actually something I haven't thought a lot about. It's very kind of compelling.
And I guess as like has the potential to almost like give wings to a listener and how they can position themselves
right
to where they want to receive. And also, like, you know, I was just thinking, like, if you could somehow set up a sound space where a sound that you would usually hear above you is somehow below you, the way that you could sort of virtually place someone physically impossible, like in a physical impossibly like location.
I love that. I think a lot about that with spatial effects. I don't want to derail this conversation, but with like reverbs and delays and using filters and stuff, because you can create the sense of a room, right? That's like kind of the point. But then you can create impossible rooms. Like you can make it sound like you're listening from inside of a tin can, and then all of a sudden the tin can can like morph into like a Volkswagen, and then that can turn into a cathedral, and then now you're in a long hallway, and that just makes me feel kind of giddy and excited. I love that. So cool. Yay, technology. Yeah, impossible spaces folding in on each other. Great.
And of course that just reminded me of like a scene from Inception.
The bending.
And everything that we know is just this big, right? In this little cube. Whole world. I don't know.
Well, I guess I think we got to wrap up.
Oh,
3:30.
Okay.
It's time.
All right. Well.
What is time?
What is it?
Like,
what is it?
Should I?
Well, Sarah, thanks for coming by and.
Oh, and share a cat. Oh, share a cat. Oh, zucchini.
She just woke up, so she's like, "What?"
Like,
what?
She like
the
looked
hell?
at the camera. That was like,
All right. That's our parting words for today.
Yeah.
She's
Thanks
been
for
there the whole
coming
time, by the way. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
Yeah. Good
Next, we're going to be talking to a wonderful drummer and improviser named Rajna, and we will let y'all know when that's going to happen. We're still trying to schedule it, so we'll keep you posted. Keep an ear out.